A courtroom often carries a quiet weight that can be felt the moment you step inside, and on that particular day, the atmosphere was already tense before anything unusual even happened. People sat in their seats with measured patience, some shifting slightly, others staring ahead as if trying to predict what would come next, while the soft murmur of hushed conversations slowly faded as the proceedings were about to begin. The judge's bench stood firm at the front, a symbol of order and authority, and every person present seemed to understand that whatever unfolded here would be guided by rules, structure, and formality. There was an unspoken expectation that everyone would follow the usual rhythm of a legal setting, where lawyers speak on behalf of their clients, where evidence is presented in careful sequence, and where emotions are often restrained behind professional composure. Yet beneath that structured environment, there was also a subtle tension that often accompanies important hearings, a mix of anticipation and uncertainty that lingers in the air, especially when cases involve personal matters that carry emotional weight. People in the room adjusted their posture, some glancing toward the front, others checking the time, while the quiet shuffle of papers and the occasional clearing of a throat added to the sense that something significant was about to take place. The courtroom itself, with its polished wood surfaces and orderly arrangement, seemed almost frozen in a moment before motion, as if waiting for a signal to bring everything into action. Attendees included individuals directly involved in the matter, along with observers who were there either out of obligation or curiosity, each person carrying their own thoughts and expectations about how the session might proceed. Despite the formal setting, human emotion was present in subtle ways. In the way some individuals held their hands together tightly, in the way others avoided eye contact, and in the quiet breathing that hinted at underlying concern or focus. The judge's presence added a layer of gravity, reinforcing the seriousness of the environment and reminding everyone that decisions made in this room would carry consequences beyond these walls. Even the simplest movements felt deliberate, as though every action had to align with the decorum expected in such a place. There was no rush, no chaos, only a steady buildup of attention as the room collectively prepared for the proceedings to move forward. In that moment, nothing seemed out of place. Nothing suggested that the ordinary flow of a courtroom session would be interrupted, and yet the very nature of such environments is that they can shift suddenly when an unexpected voice or action breaks through the established order. The stillness, combined with the anticipation, created a kind of quiet stage where every detail mattered, and where even a small change in tone or behavior could draw immediate notice from everyone present, setting the stage for something that would soon disrupt the calm and redirect the attention of the entire room in a way that no one had anticipated. A small figure rising from a seat in a courtroom is not something people expect to carry much weight, especially when that figure belongs to a child. Yet in that moment, all attention begins to shift in her direction as she stands with a level of composure that feels out of place for her age. The room, already filled with quiet anticipation, subtly redirects its focus toward her, as heads turn and eyes narrow with curiosity, trying to understand what is happening and why a child would suddenly choose to speak in such a formal setting. There is a brief pause, almost as if the room itself is processing the sight, and in that pause, her voice emerges with clarity and confidence that contrasts with the silence surrounding her. When she declares that she is her mother's lawyer, the words land in the space with a kind of impact that momentarily disrupts the expected order of the courtroom, because it is not a statement that fits within the usual framework of legal representation or courtroom procedure. Lawyers are typically trained professionals, adults who have studied law and understand the complexities of legal systems. And yet here stands someone who does not fit that description in the conventional sense, challenging the assumptions that everyone in the room has quietly accepted. The declaration is simple in phrasing, but the meaning behind it raises immediate questions in the minds of those present, prompting thoughts about whether this is a misunderstanding, a misstatement, or something entirely unexpected. The judge, accustomed to maintaining control over proceedings, now faces a moment that requires interpretation and response, while attorneys and observers alike begin to process the implications of what has just been said. The tone of the child's voice, steady and direct, suggests a level of seriousness that makes it difficult to dismiss her words outright, even if they appear unconventional. In that instant, the courtroom dynamics begin to shift, not through any formal motion or legal argument, but through a single statement that draws collective attention and invites scrutiny. People lean slightly forward, trying to catch every detail, while others exchange brief glances that reflect their surprise or confusion. The declaration does not just introduce a new voice into the room. It introduces a perspective that stands apart from the expected norms of legal proceedings, creating a moment where curiosity begins to outweigh routine. There is a sense that something about this situation requires closer examination, that behind the simplicity of the statement lies a context that is not immediately visible to everyone present. The child's posture, her eye contact, and the way she holds herself contribute to the impression that she is not merely speaking on a whim, but instead presenting herself with a purpose that she believes in. This unexpected claim begins to challenge the assumptions held by those observing, prompting them to reconsider what they think they know about authority, representation, and voice within a courtroom setting. The environment, which moments ago was governed entirely by formal expectations, now accommodates a disruption that is both surprising and thought-provoking, as the presence of a young speaker introduces a layer of complexity that no one had anticipated, drawing the room into a heightened state of attention as they begin to question how such a statement should be understood and what it might lead to next. The immediate reaction that follows the girl's statement is not uniform, but it is unmistakable, as surprise spreads across the faces of those seated in the courtroom and settles into a shared moment of disbelief that briefly interrupts the usual flow of proceedings. The judge, positioned at the center of authority, now faces a situation that is not accounted for in standard courtroom expectations, where the speaker before them does not align with the typical profile of someone authorized to represent another individual in a legal capacity. This discrepancy creates a pause in the proceedings, not necessarily a formal one, but a perceptible shift in energy that signals the need for clarification. Attendees begin to adjust their attention more intently toward the child, as if trying to confirm what they have just heard, while subtle movements in the room, such as the repositioning of papers or the slight turning of heads, reflect the collective effort to process the moment. The surprise is not only about the age of the speaker, but about the nature of the claim itself, which directly engages with a role that carries responsibility, knowledge, and recognition within the legal system. In a setting where roles are clearly defined and understood, any deviation from those roles stands out sharply, and this instance is no exception. The judge's expression may remain composed, as expected in a professional environment, yet the situation demands attention and consideration, since the claim introduces an unexpected variable into the proceedings that cannot be ignored. Lawyers present in the room, accustomed to maintaining composure, may exchange brief glances that reflect their assessment of the situation, while also acknowledging the unusual nature of what has just occurred. Observers, whether directly involved or simply witnessing the event, find themselves drawn into the moment, their curiosity heightened by the contrast between expectation and reality. The statement made by the girl does not merely register as surprising. It actively disrupts the assumptions that underpin the structure of the courtroom, prompting those present to reconcile what they are seeing with what they believe to be possible within such a setting. The silence that follows is not empty, but filled with thought, as individuals begin to consider explanations, possibilities, or interpretations that might account for the claim. Some may question whether the statement was meant literally or figuratively, while others focus on how the judge will respond, anticipating whether clarification will be requested or whether the proceedings will continue under adjusted circumstances. The presence of uncertainty creates a subtle tension, as the room collectively navigates a moment that sits outside the boundaries of routine procedure. Even though the environment remains physically unchanged, the perception of it shifts, as the introduction of this unexpected claim alters the way people engage with what is unfolding before them. Attention becomes more concentrated, observation more deliberate, and the usual predictability of the courtroom gives way to a moment that requires interpretation and careful consideration. In this space, where precision and order are typically paramount, the surprise generated by the child's statement serves as a focal point that redirects mental and visual focus toward understanding the situation, encouraging everyone present to remain attentive as they await the next development that will clarify the meaning and implications of what has just been declared. As the initial surprise begins to settle, a different kind of reaction starts to emerge in the courtroom, one that is less about shock and more about curiosity mixed with cautious assessment, as the girl does not withdraw or hesitate after making her statement, but instead remains standing with a sense of calm determination that draws continued attention from everyone present. The judge, maintaining a composed and neutral demeanor, now has the responsibility to determine how to proceed in light of a claim that does not align with standard courtroom expectations, and this naturally leads to a moment where clarification becomes necessary. Questions begin to form, not just in the minds of those observing, but as part of the unfolding interaction that will help define the direction of the proceedings. The girl's insistence on speaking suggests that her statement was not made impulsively, but rather with the intention of being heard and considered, which introduces a new dynamic into the room where a child is not merely present as an observer, but actively participating in a way that challenges conventional roles. This insistence captures attention in a different way than the initial announcement, as it demonstrates persistence rather than surprise, signaling that there may be more context behind her words than what is immediately apparent. The judge's role in this moment is not only to maintain order, but also to ensure that the proceedings remain fair and understandable to all parties involved, which may involve allowing the girl to explain herself further before any conclusions are drawn. Legal professionals in the room, accustomed to interpreting statements within procedural boundaries, now find themselves observing closely, evaluating both the content and the manner in which the girl communicates, as her tone and confidence continue to suggest a level of awareness that encourages others to listen rather than dismiss her. The atmosphere subtly shifts from one of confusion to one of measured engagement, as the initial instinct to question her claim gives way to a more open-minded approach, where her words are given the opportunity to be clarified. People in the room begin to focus not only on what was said, but on what will be said next, anticipating that additional explanation may provide insight into her role and the reason behind her statement. The judge may request further details, prompting the girl to elaborate on her position, her relationship to the case, or the basis on which she believes she is acting in a representative capacity, and this exchange becomes a pivotal moment in which understanding can begin to take shape. Observers, who moments earlier were reacting to the unexpected nature of the claim, now shift into a listening posture, recognizing that the situation is evolving into something that requires careful attention rather than immediate judgment. The girl's continued presence at the center of attention reinforces the idea that her participation is intentional, and her willingness to remain engaged under scrutiny suggests a level of confidence that further encourages the room to take her seriously, at least long enough to hear her out. In this environment, where structure and hierarchy typically guide interactions, the act of a young individual insisting on being heard introduces a subtle but meaningful disruption that invites reconsideration of assumptions about who can speak, when they can speak, and how their words are received within a formal setting, creating a moment where attention, patience, and openness become essential as the situation continues to unfold and the room prepares to respond to whatever clarification may follow in a setting where authority is typically associated with experience, formal training, and recognized credentials. The presence of a young child asserting herself with clarity and confidence introduces a striking contrast that naturally draws attention and invites reassessment of assumptions about capability. Her confidence does not appear forced or exaggerated, but instead comes across as steady and self-assured, which makes it more compelling to those observing her. In a courtroom environment, where communication is often measured, precise, and grounded in established roles, such composure from someone so young stands out immediately, not because it is loud or disruptive, but because it challenges expectations in a quiet and direct way. The assumptions held by many in the room, shaped by years of experience with legal proceedings, include the belief that representation and advocacy are responsibilities carried out by trained professionals who have dedicated significant time to understanding the law. Yet the girl's presence and manner of speaking begin to introduce the idea that confidence and clarity can also come from unexpected sources. As she continues to hold her ground, maintaining eye contact and speaking with purpose, the room is subtly encouraged to reconsider the relationship between age and ability, as her behavior suggests a level of awareness and intention that goes beyond what might typically be expected from someone her age. This does not immediately replace the established norms, but it does create a space where those norms are temporarily questioned, as observers find themselves balancing what they know with what they are witnessing. The contrast becomes even more noticeable when compared to the formal attire, structured dialogue, and procedural nature of the courtroom, all of which are designed to reflect professionalism and order, while her presence represents something outside of that familiar framework. Yet instead of causing disruption through disorder, her confidence introduces a different kind of influence, one that encourages attention rather than resistance. People in the room begin to observe her more closely, not just listening to her words, but also noting her tone, her posture, and the way she carries herself under scrutiny. These observations contribute to an evolving perception, where initial surprise gradually gives way to a more thoughtful consideration of what she is expressing. The situation highlights how confidence can shape perception, especially in environments where authority is usually predefined, as her willingness to speak and remain composed under pressure creates a sense that her role, whatever it may be, is not accidental. This challenges the automatic association between authority and age, suggesting that while experience is important, the ability to communicate clearly and stand firm in one's position also plays a significant role in how individuals are perceived. The courtroom, which typically relies on established hierarchies, now finds itself in a moment where those hierarchies are momentarily blurred, not by conflict, but by the presence of an individual who does not conform to expected categories. As attention remains fixed on her, the contrast between expectation and reality becomes a central element of the moment, prompting those present to engage not only with the situation itself, but also with their own assumptions about competence and representation. As they witness a scenario that invites reflection on how confidence can influence understanding in ways that extend beyond traditional boundaries, as the moment continues to unfold, the atmosphere in the courtroom begins to shift from one of surprise and curiosity into something more focused and uncertain, as everyone present waits to see how the situation will develop and what direction it will take next. The unexpected nature of the girl's statement has already disrupted the normal flow of proceedings, and now the room seems to be collectively holding its breath, anticipating a response or action that will bring clarity to what is happening. The judge, maintaining composure, is now faced with the responsibility of determining how to proceed in a way that preserves order while also acknowledging the unusual claim that has been made. This creates a subtle tension, as the balance between maintaining procedural standards and addressing an unconventional situation must be carefully managed. Attorneys and observers alike remain attentive, their focus fixed on the center of the room where the child stands, as the significance of her presence becomes more pronounced with each passing moment. What began as a simple declaration has now evolved into a point of interest that draws the attention of everyone in the room, prompting them to consider what might come next and how the situation will be resolved. The uncertainty surrounding her role continues to linger, and this uncertainty contributes to the overall sense of anticipation, as people begin to realize that the outcome of this moment may not follow a predictable path. The girl's earlier statement, combined with her composure, has already set the stage for something that feels different from a typical courtroom exchange. and now the question shifts toward understanding the implications of her involvement. The judge may need to ask further questions or allow additional explanation to clarify her position, while the rest of the room listens closely, aware that the response could provide important context that will shape the remainder of the proceedings. The environment remains formal, yet the energy within it has changed, becoming more attentive and reflective as individuals process the situation in real time. Subtle reactions can be observed among those present, from slight shifts in posture to exchanged glances that reflect both curiosity and the desire to understand what is unfolding. The presence of the child at the center of this moment continues to challenge the expectations typically associated with courtroom roles, and this challenge is not expressed through conflict, but through the quiet persistence of her claim and her willingness to remain engaged. As the room waits, there is a growing awareness that this situation may reveal something beyond the initial surprise, something that could explain why she has positioned herself in this way and what she intends to communicate moving forward. The sense of anticipation becomes more pronounced as each person in the room prepares to listen carefully to whatever follows, recognizing that the next development may provide the clarity needed to move the proceedings forward, while also bringing resolution to the questions that have emerged since the moment she first spoke.